Now this week, we have Lillie Henley on mother-daughter relationships. Now Reverend Lillie Mae Henley will share with us some of the dynamics of mother-daughter relationships, as well as anecdotes which women have shared with her. Lillie Mae Henley has a Master of Divinity from the Unitarian Universalist theological school in Chicago and studied family systems theory at the University of Chicago School of Social Work. She retired from the Unitarian Universalist ministry in 2018. Please give a warm welcome to Lillie Henley.
Testing. That's the first time a man's turned me on, and I don't know how many.
You're welcome.
This is a friend of mine, Melody Patterson. Many of you know her. She works in the front office as a membership person on Wednesdays. And she is we're going to do a duo poem for you today.
The poem is called A Woman Mourned by Her Daughters by Adrienne Rich.
Now, not a tear begun. We sit here in your kitchen, spent, you see, already.
You are swollen till you strain this house and the whole sky. You, who we so often succeeded in ignoring.
You are puffed up in death, like a corpse pulled from the sea. We groan beneath your weight.
And yet you were a leaf, a straw blown on the bed. You had long since become crisp as a dead insect.
What is it, if not you, that settles on us now? Like satin, you pull down over our bridal heads.
What rises in our throats, like food you prodded in? Nothing could be enough.
You breathe upon us now through solid assertions of yourself. Teaspoons, goblets, seas of carpet, a forest of old plants to be watered.
And all this universe dares us to lay a finger anywhere, save exactly as you would wish it done.
Thank you, Melody. Good morning. Thank you, Open Circle, for having me. I am honored to be with you today. The title of my talk could be many things. It could be, Mother, I Wash My Rice Now. But I titled it, Mothers Teach Us Many Things. Mother's Day 2023. Now in this talk, there will be places where I will laugh and have a weird sense of humor, and you might not be laughing, but I'm not afraid to laugh in front of you. So if anything I say offends you, laugh. And if it makes you laugh, laugh. Mother's Day has a lot of meaning for most of us, both positive and negative. All of us are somewhere on the continuum, beginning at one end that says, I adored my mother, and at the other end, what mother? In today's talk, I will share with you stories that people have shared with me over the years about their mothers. Then we will consider the mother-daughter dynamic of the United States culture. I had not studied this dynamic in the Canadian or Mexican culture, so I will not go there, but if you are from either one, you are welcome to apply it to your experiences. And last, I'll share the best lesson my mother ever taught me. Some of the stories and anecdotes have a name, but it is not a real name. Someone said, my mother and I don't have a particularly close relationship. In fact, I've spent my whole adult life trying to think about what my mother would do, and then I do the opposite. In a Mother's Day talk one time, I said I believe that mothers do the best they can with what they have to work with. And a woman told me after the service, we were 3 little girls. My mother would wake up, cook my father's breakfast, dress up, and leave the house. She would come home in time to cook dinner. Is she a mother if we never saw her? Well, of course, there's more to this story, because the mother did take care of them when they were little, and fed them and dressed them and took care of them. But once they were old enough to take care of themselves and get up and have their own breakfast and get off to school, well, they never saw their mother. I told the woman, I said, you know, that might have been the best that she could do. And the woman said, she's a mother. And I said, really, it was probably the best that she could do. And if you have issues about it, you need to work on yourself with love and care, and forgive yourself for any negative things that you might think about yourself because of her. But it's all on you now. You're the grown one. Once, when I was planning a Mother's Day service for my Unitarian congregation, I asked 3 women if they would share something about their mothers at the service. And one woman told me later, I was very uneasy when you asked me to talk about my mother. You see, I don't remember many good things about growing up. But you know what? After I thought about it for several days, I began to remember some positive things. It was like an epiphany. And then she said, thank you, Pastor Lillie, for giving me this opportunity. A young man I met, he was young to me, he was in his 40s, told me he grew up on a farm. He said, my mother taught me 2 things that make me the man I am today. She taught me how to grow things, and she taught me to be kind to animals. Ginger, a woman I used to live close to, told me there were 5 sisters in her family, no boys. I will never forget, she said, when we would start arguing and fussing like only 5 sisters could do, my mother would say, now girls, sweep off your own back porch first. Some woman's mother told them, if you can't say anything good about somebody, don't say anything at all. And many women told me that. Greg, a friend of mine, told me, my mother raised herself. Her mother was institutionalized and her father was absent. She met my father when they were teenagers and were parents by the time they were 18. What saved them both and what gave us stability as a family was their involvement in a church. Now, my mother did not know how to show her love, but I never questioned her love because she made sure we had healthy food, and while she bought our clothes at a second-hand store, they were always cleaned and ironed. She used to tell us, Greg said, sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Has anybody heard that from the Bible? Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. He said, I didn't know exactly how the Bible wanted us to interpret this, but as a boy, I understood it to mean, make it to the end of the day and you'll be all right. He said, I carry this with me. It has seen me through all the trials and tribulations of my life. Rachel told me that her mother taught her to be good to others, to care about other people. And she did that. Her mother did that. She said, my mother did that her whole life. And she said something to me when she was dying, and I carry it with me always. She said, Rachel, what I love about you is the way you care about people. You are sympathetic and kind. Isn't that a wonderful thing for your mother to say to you when she's dying? Shelley told me, I adored my mother. She was tall and beautiful and brave and talented, and she taught me how to garden and how to treat people and how to love animals, and I miss her every day. I cannot tell you how many women have told me how happy they were their mother taught them how to garden. And one of the sweetest stories that I've heard is from a friend from long ago. She said, I loved my mother immensely. She was a Buddhist and one of the nicest people I have ever known. She was selfless, paying for music lessons and art lessons when she needed clothes and shoes. I was blessed to be with her when she was dying. I held her in my arms, and her eyes closed, and then they blinked open, and all the intelligence of a human being was in her eyes. And she said, what happened? And I said, Mother, you're going home to rest. You'll rest and replenish, and you'll never be tired again. Once at a women's retreat, we were telling stories about our mothers. Now, what does that tell us about the ones of us who were there? That we had to have a retreat to work on our issues. And probably a 3-day retreat was not nearly enough. Anyway, the question we were asking everyone to answer was, if you were sitting and talking to your mother, what would you say to her? And one woman stood up and at the top of her lungs said, F you, Mother! Yeah, she really did. As a teen, I remember reading an article from one of those popular gossip magazines. You remember they were all over the stands, magazines. Well, I had finished my homework, so I could read it. And there was a story about Betty Davis. Betty Davis. I'll never forget it. It was all about her relationship with her mother. And the title was something like this. My sister was an only child. Another phrase I heard from women and men, their mother said to them when they needed advice or help, follow your heart. Follow your heart. Now, I remember saying that to my son, but I don't remember where I heard it because I don't think I ever heard Marguerite, my mother, say it. But I'm sure many of you here have said that to your child. Follow your heart. But what the heck does it mean, follow your heart? The best I can come up with is that mothers have a strong belief that our children have a sense of themselves. Now, human beings do have that sense of themselves, that knowingness of being themselves. But famous theologians like Kant and Schleiermacher, they talk about that self as being an empirical self. And Tandeka, a modern theologian, calls it the embodied self. And psychoanalysts tell us about the mothers and fathers, that when we say that at first, our children are probably a little too young to know what it means. But I do believe that if we keep saying it over their lifetime of growing up, that it does make a difference. And I did ask my son on the phone the other day, do you remember me saying, follow your heart? And he said, yes, Mom, and you were a good mother. If you knew my son. Sometimes I make the joke, you know, he's a case for like the animals that eat their young when they're born. But when I try to say that as a joke, people don't understand that I can say it. So I don't say it anymore. Lynn, a long ago friend, once told me a story about her mother. She said that when her mother grew too old to no longer be able to care for herself, she moved her mother into her home. Now, Lynn had a ritual. Every Saturday morning, she would make a big breakfast for her family. And then when her mother moved in, her mother would sit in the kitchen and watch her. Her mother would sit there, and whenever Lynn made scrambled eggs, her mother would say, you know, you really ought to put water in them instead of milk. They're fluffier. And of course, Lynn said, Mother, it's my breakfast. I've been doing this since I got married. It's my eggs. It's my family. I'm putting in milk. Well, a few years after that, I asked Lynn, I said, Lynn, how do you make your scrambled eggs? And she said, you know it, I put water in them. They're fluffier. There is something about mother-daughter relationships, or better yet, mother-daughter conflict, that for most mothers and daughters, it is a challenge. There are some mother-daughter relationships that are wonderful from the start. And then some are like my dearest friend Mary's. She said, my daughter had issues with me when she came out of the womb, and I'm not kidding. It would take us quite some time to examine the breadth of literature on the subject, why some PhDs, some researchers get a PhD in mother-daughter conflict. And I'm sure some of the women here today might think they have a PhD in it too. And Marguerite was my mother. She was an old country gal from Texas. She barely got out of the 8th grade because of illness and because of the hard life on the dairy farm on which she lived. She was unsophisticated, unsure of herself, and an unworldly woman. Yet, when she went shopping with me at Sakowitz in the Galleria, and we had lunch in their tea room, she found the hooks on the edges of the tables underneath, and she said, you're supposed to hang your purses on them. I was so impressed with my mother. She had the wisdom of women throughout the ages, and she was a steel magnolia of immeasurable proportions. Marguerite had 3 daughters, Blanche the eldest, Jean the youngest, and me, I was in the middle. She had one son, James. He died young, 42, from an ultralight plane crash. But today's the day we're talking about the mothers, the daughters, and the mothers. Jean did not have any observable conflict with Mother. Jean is one of those fortunate people that have the ability to differentiate from the negative. I can't stand it. When Mother tried to force her will on Jean, Jean just ignored her. And I asked Jean, how do you do that? How do you just ignore Mother? I just ignore her. Blanche learned to deal with Mother by being too busy to visit with her very often. But I would try to see my mother as much as I can as an adult. And when I was about in my late 30s, I had a conversation with Mother. It was about her struggles in life, and she seemed to need to tell me the story of her growing up in early adult life. Not only did I begin to see there was some reasoning behind what she tried to teach us, but I saw that what drove her was not a desire to manipulate our lives, just to manipulate them. It was from pain and fear. And she wanted us to have a life without pain and fear. Researchers tell us that daughters do not break away from their mothers like sons break away from their mothers. Sons break away so they can identify with their fathers. We daughters are more a part of our mother's emotional makeup than our brothers. Aren't we lucky? They also tell us what drives our mothers to be manipulative is their desire for their daughters to have a different or better life than they had. So our mothers are with us our whole lives, for better or for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. After that one conversation with Mother, our relationship changed. Oh, Mother didn't really change that much. She still tried to get her way, all the way to the grave. But for me, it all made sense, and being around her wasn't so difficult anymore. Looking back, I dwell on her love and her desire for us to have a better life than she had. And somehow her dying made the conflict all right too. When I was going through my divorce from my son's father and I was in considerable pain, I said, Mother, how do I do it? How do I do it? And she said, Lillie Mae, you keep on keeping on. Keep putting one foot in front of the other, and before you know it, you're through this rough patch. So I learned to keep on keeping on from my mother. A few weeks after my father died, she went down to the funeral home and planned her own funeral. She then said to us, I know I've always said that I wanted to be buried in a little red dress, but I've changed my mind. One of those little print things in my closet will be just fine. She then proceeded to give us 3 daughters her good jewelry. Now, her good jewelry was the diamonds that she had gotten the last decade of her and my father's life together. And we asked, what are you doing? And she said, well, I may have one day or I may have 10 years, but this is about what I have to leave you, and I want to see you enjoy it before I go. She taught me then, and most of my life, that giving was a good thing. But she was like other mothers too, perhaps like your mother. She thought the way she taught us to do things was the right way. And she expected it done that way even after we were grown. Once Marguerite and Clarence were visiting me in my home, and I cooked a rice and chicken casserole. It turned out a little mushy. She said, "You didn't wash your rice, did you?" The package didn't say wash the rice, Mom. So I didn't. You always have to wash your rice, Lily. Didn't I teach you that? Well, I felt like Lynn then. It was my house, my rice, and my home, and my meal. But Marguerite was a great cook. It was in what seemed like no time at all on a Sunday afternoon. She could throw together a lunch for anybody who came over after church. Fried chicken, homemade mashed potatoes and gravy, no lumps, mind you, fresh green beans, biscuits, and banana pudding. But after her heart bypass, the doctor wanted her to stop using Crisco and real butter and salt and black pepper. And she said, "I'm through cooking. You girls can do it all now." Well, of course, we had to cook. But I picture her in my mind's eye, sitting at the dining room table, watching every move we made, from measuring spices to making the cornbread. And if we didn't do it exactly as she wanted, she'd tell us. Even after she developed macular degeneration in both eyes, she could still see every move we made, every nuance of nonverbal behavior, and if we made faces or rolled our eyes. And you know what she would say? "I may be blind, but I can still see you." One Saturday morning, we picked up a big batch of greens at the farmer's market. We hadn't had fresh greens in a while. So Jean and I started to wash the greens. And Mother said to wash them at least 7 or 8 times. You know, they were probably picked yesterday and they still have that country sand on them. And Jean and I looked at each other, shook our heads, and pretended to wash them 7 or 8 times. But really just about 4 times. Now, we're grown women, and we're acting like teenagers. But mothers will do that to you, won't they? Sometimes. Those greens cooked all day, and the delicious aroma wafted through the house, stimulating our taste buds and making us very hungry for greens and cornbread. And we finally sat down to supper. And when we took our first bite of greens, we immediately spit them out. You couldn't see the fine grains of country sand, but they were there. And Marguerite said, "You didn't wash those 7 or 8 times, did you?" But what could we do? We paid for our sin. We couldn't eat those beautiful, delicious-looking greens that we cooked all day. Mother taught us many things. How to cook, how to throw a party. You could never have too much food at a party. Mother taught us how to behave like Southern women. Give your husband the biggest steak. And she taught us how to dress like a Southern woman. Never wear white shoes before Easter and never after Labor Day. Mother taught us to respect our elders and always say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. And guilt, oh, my mother could teach that. She had a way of getting what she wanted, and I suppose needed, by finding a way somehow to make us feel guilty about whatever it was she wanted. Of course, over the years, as we became mature women, yeah, I wonder when that was. We began to try to deal with her in healthy ways. In fact, I remember the last time we thought she was up to her manipulative ways. Jean and I were going to Dallas with her daughter's dance troupe, and we didn't want to take Mother because she was a lot of trouble. Now, today we'd call her high maintenance. So we had her stay with Blanche, and while we were gone, Mother fainted and hit her head on a coffee table. She was weak and dizzy. When we returned, Mother wasn't any better. I took her to the doctor, and the doctor took some x-rays and said, "Mrs. Henley, most likely you have lung cancer. We need to do more tests." And since Mother smoked, she pretty much knew the truth of what the doctor said. And she said to the doctor, "Nope, we're not doing any tests or anything else." And then she turned to me and said, "Take me home, Lillie Mae. I'll live till I die." And that's exactly what she did. She went home and she lived on her own in her own home until 3 months later when she died. We took loving care of her. We did everything for her. Hospice came, they comforted us, but they didn't need to do anything for Marguerite because we did everything for her. She didn't need to ask for anything. She taught us how to honor those who came before, and that is what we did for her. We took care of her because we honored her, and it was an honor to be with her in her loving and peaceful passing. The weekend she died, hospice told us it would probably be that weekend, so all of us were there, her 3 daughters, her 3 granddaughters, and her 3 great-granddaughters. And we sang old hymns and old songs and played music for her and told her how much we loved her and how much we were going to miss her. And when she died, each of us in turn washed her. We dressed her in a new gown and put fresh roses all around her body. And we stayed around the bed for a long time, whispering and laughing and crying and comforting each other. And then after we had that time with her, we called the funeral home and they came and got her. Without saying a word, we walked in the kitchen, her kitchen, and began to cook. I made rice, washing it carefully. And Jean made chicken and gravy, and Blanche cooked vegetables and made cornbread, and one granddaughter made her wonderful potato salad, and another sweet tea, and another dessert. We did it exactly how my mother would have had us do it. Marguerite taught us so very much. She taught us how to live. She taught us how to live well. And she taught us how to die. The woman who brought us into the world showed us how to leave it. What more could I ever ask for? Blanche had kidney disease, and sometime during the summer of 2006, she knew she was going to die that year. And I was moving to Washington, D.C., and so I went and spent a whole week with her in the nursing home and did everything for her, just like all of the nurses and aides did for her that whole week. And during that week, my fundamental Christian, lover of Jesus, church-going sister whispered to me, "I'm sorry I won't be alive when Hillary becomes president." In December, she told her daughter, "Take me home from this place. I want to die in my house." And she did just that. She went home and lived till she died. That's what our mother taught us. And while all of our deaths will be different from Marguerite's and different from anyone else's death, we can take a lesson from that old country woman. We can live till we die and then show them how it's done. Thank you. You don't have to say anything, Bill.
Thank you.
Oh, well, I'll take a thank you.
Normally,
Let me tell them what we're going to do.
Okay.
Please. Okay.
Yeah.
So you see roses up here. Now, we can't have Mother's Day without roses. Now, I have red and yellow. And if red is too emotionally traumatizing, we have yellow. But what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you would like to share something about your mother or something about Mother's Day, you are welcome to come up and for just a minute or two, say something about Mother or Mother's Day. And if you do that, you can have a rose. So everyone is invited who would like to come up. And you will have the microphone, and you can share. Really.
Hello. Hi, my name is Meredith. My mother, Alice, and I were very close growing up, but we had a little falling out as adults, and I asked her to be less critical and more of my friend. Because I was an adult now, she didn't have to criticize everything I did and guide me. So we were estranged for a few years, and her second husband, not my father, died, and she was alone. We'd talk on the phone now and then, but I didn't want to be in her presence for many years. So,
Yes, we have music.
okay, so I should shut up.
No.
No, okay. So I was like, pull her off. So one day, I follow guidance. I'm a minister, so my spirit guide said to me, time to go see your mother. I'm like, oh, shoot, really? And like, yep, okay. So I followed guidance. I went back with my two sons, went to her, where she lived in Virginia. Her husband had died. And I walked into the room, and I didn't really understand that her memory was going. And she looked at me and she said, you're my daughter, and I haven't seen you for a long time. It's been 7 years. I said, that's okay, Mom, I'm here now. And she just forgot why she was mad at me. So we had a nice ending to our life together, and I would go visit her, and she'd actually give me compliments like, you know, you're a good driver. I'd take her out of the nursing home, whatever. And I said, well, you taught me to drive. So we would laugh at that, change her diapers, and she said, you're a good daughter. So it all ended well.
And you may have a rose. Thank you.
I am Loretta. I had one of those relationships with my mother that if I ever wanted to feel bad about myself, all I had to do was call her or see her, and I would leave feeling like, oh, not good enough. And she spent the last 6 years of her life in a nursing home, which turned out to be, for both of us, very good years. And on her 90th birthday, I got her dressed for a little party we were having, and she's sitting in a wheelchair a few feet away, and I said, Mom, how does it feel to be 90? And she didn't even stop to think. She said, it went so fast. And then I said, I don't know why, but I said, would you do anything differently? And she looked at me and said, I'd be a better mother. And my first response was, she knew. And then I had compassion, because I've heard so many mothers say their overwhelming feeling is guilt. And I went over and I kneeled down in front of her, and I put my hands in hers, and I said, Mom, you were the best mother I could have had, because you taught me everything I needed to know, which was true. And we had 3 years of a love affair. The things that she used to do that aggravated me, I just let go. Like, I'd cut her hair, and she used to say, oh, there's some hair on the floor, and I'd go, oh. And then I started saying, did I leave any hair on the floor? And the last 3 years were just a gift for both of us.
Here's your rose. All right. Someone else?
My mother was a very good mother. And at 85, she was still living in her own apartment, but her memory was going. But fortunately, she was in a co-op, so everybody would watch out for her, because I was still working, so I couldn't take her home with me. And I had someone come in twice a week to bathe her and used to do her hair and everything for her. And this one Saturday, I was taking her to a party, and fortunately, she still remembered everybody, but didn't know how to use a can opener or a stove or any of those things anymore. So I was happy that she still knew who everybody was. So anyway, she always kept herself immaculate, always had her makeup on and everything, until at 85, like I say. She didn't wear makeup anymore, and if I didn't have someone come in and do her hair, she was, it was messy and that. So that Saturday, of all things, they sent another worker to bathe her and do her hair and everything. And apparently a person came in, and instead of saying to her, it's time for, she came in and she said, do you want to have a bath and have your hair done? And she said no. So the person left. So I come to pick her up and she's a mess. So I managed to give her a bath at least and get her all nicely dressed and everything to go out. And I get her purse and everything for her. I said, okay, Mom, we're ready to go out. And she stared at me. She said, if you think I'm going out looking like this, you're out of your mind. So I had to take her to the hairdresser, and we were an hour late.
Thank you. Here's your rose. Okay, a caveat? Oh, a PS.
Yes, I have a sister 15 years older, not anymore, and a brother 10 years older, and I have all these cousins that are older, and I watch the women becoming mothers and raising kids, and I said to myself, that looks really scary, I'm not going to do it. And fortunately, I live in an era where I had a choice, and I didn't, and it was really good for me because I have a lot of godchildren.
Oh, right. And actually, sometimes I think children are overrated. We have two more.
I'll try to go quickly.
No.
Interesting how
We
the
have
audience
time.
has changed this Sunday. Thank you for the men who are actually here because they're pretty skimpy today. But I wanted to say I have a biological mother, but I have several other mothers because there was a time where I couldn't be with my mother. And I appreciate all of the women in my life who have been sisters and mothers and who have helped me get where I am today. And for anybody who adopts or takes somebody under their wing, even though you don't have a biological child, I still believe that we're all mothers.
Yes.
And I want to thank everyone for continuing to be in this community and be sisters and mothers. Thank you.
Here, take your rose.
You're welcome.
There are all kinds of mothers, and not all of them are conventional. My mother was a fortune teller, a gypsy, a rebel from the beginning, and she taught me a lot of things. She always approved of whatever I did, because I did it because I am who I am. And she supported me in every way. And she also showed me a spiritual path in that she was a disciple of, a follower of Paramahansa Yogananda, who we heard about previously at Open Circle. And she was also loved the Unitarian Church and introduced me to that. So she left me a spiritual path. And I really appreciate that. And she also taught me how to die.
Rose. There's going to be someone else. One more person. Oh, Reva. Remember, I have a chair.
Just
We
wanted to
know
make it
Rita.
short.
She knows I know her.
I saw this morning, and I can't tell you what the source was, but it had to do with giving your mother the greatest gift. It had to do with giving your mother the greatest gift. Tell your mother she was right. It's the best gift you could give her.
Thank you. You can have a rose. That's why she came up. She knows I love her. All right, anyone else? Thank you for coming today. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for listening. And I wish you all the best of a wonderful Mother's Day.
Well, thank you very much. That was excellent. Thank you. My mother was determined to care for us whether we wanted it or not. My father was a coal miner, and after a hard day in the coal mine, he would like to dilute the coal dust with copious quantities of beer. So when he came home, he staggered through the door and said, "I'll just go to bed." And she would say, "You can't go to bed on an empty stomach full of beer." And she'd get the lard out and mix something.